remember it like yesterday. My sister-in-law walked into my dining room carrying a black leather folder. She had that proud smile on her face, the kind people wear when they think they are about to win. My children sat at the table too, their eyes filled with confusion, while she spoke in a voice that made the air heavy. "Mother," she said sweetly, "these are legal documents. It is time for you to step down. You're too senile to run anything anymore. We are taking over your company." The words cut through the room like a knife. My hands trembled, but not from fear. Oh no, I had been through storms worse than this. I was trembling because I had been waiting for this exact moment. I took the pen she pushed towards me, and with a smile that startled them all, I signed the papers. Their faces lit up with greedy joy, thinking they had inherited wealth beyond measure. But what they were about to inherit wasn't gold or power. It was something darker. Something that would destroy them piece by piece. And as I set the pen down and folded my hands, I whispered in my heart, "Now it begins." But let me take you back, my dear friends. Let me tell you how it all started, because the road to this moment was not a straight one. It was filled with laughter, betrayal, pain, and lessons that would shake even the strongest soul. Oh, before I forget, let me introduce myself properly. My name is Margaret Collins. I am 76 years old, speaking to you from the quiet little town of Charleston, South Carolina. And yes, I'm a grandmother. Now if you're new here, please, don't forget to subscribe, like, and click that notification button so you never miss another one of my stories. And while you're at it, tell me in the comments from which part of the country you're watching. I love knowing where my friends are listening from. Alright, now that we're settled, let me take you back to the very beginning. When I was a little girl, I never thought life would twist the way it did. I was born into a simple family. My father was a fisherman, my mother a schoolteacher. We didn't have much, but what we had was love, discipline, and dignity. Those three things carried me through life when money couldn't. I married young. My husband, Richard, was a tall, strong man with dreams bigger than his pockets. He worked hard, and together we built something from nothing. We started a small bakery, then turned it into a chain, and later, into a food company that supplied half the state. We fought, we worked, we laughed, and by the grace of God, we prospered. But with prosperity comes shadows. You see, when people smell success, they come like flies to honey. Some to celebrate with you, but many to taste what isn't theirs. That is how my sister-in-law, Linda, entered the picture. Linda was Richard's younger sister. Beautiful, sharp-tongued, and always ambitious. She married a lawyer, which gave her an extra layer of confidence, as if the law itself bent around her. First I welcomed her. She was family after all. But soon, I began to see the envy in her eyes whenever she visited our home. She would comment on the furniture, the car, the company, as if testing how long it would take before all of it became hers. Life went on. My children grew, 2 boys, Michael and Thomas. They were my joy. I raised them with all the values I had learned as a child. Honesty, hard work, respect. But as they grew into men, I noticed something troubling. The lure of easy wealth, the temptation of quick success, began to whisper in their ears. They loved me, yes, but they also loved what I had built. And Linda saw this weakness in them like a wolf sniffing out lambs. One day Richard passed away. That was the first extreme event that shook my world. His heart gave out suddenly, leaving me alone to manage both the family and the company. Grief nearly drowned me, but I didn't let it swallow me whole. I knew I had to keep moving. Not just for me, but for my children and grandchildren. But grief also opened a door for Linda to step closer, whispering advice, showing false kindness, pretending to support me. I could see her weaving her web, but I said nothing. I only watched. Years passed. The company grew even stronger, but so did the cracks in my family. Michael started making reckless business choices. Thomas drifted into a lazy comfort, living off the company's money without lifting a finger. And in the middle of all this, Linda grew bolder. She began speaking of how elderly minds cannot keep up with modern business. She hinted to my children that maybe I was too old to manage such a vast empire. Slowly, she planted seeds of doubt. Seeds that would one day sprout into betrayal. And that betrayal came to dinner. It was supposed to be a simple evening. I had cooked roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and apple pie. My husband's favorite meal, the one I always prepared when family gathered. But instead of laughter and joy, Linda arrived with papers. Legal papers. I will never forget her words. You're too senile to run anything. She thought she had won. She thought she had taken everything from me. But what they did not know, what none of them knew, was that I had been preparing for this day for years. I had already placed the company in a trust they could not control. And what I left them in those documents was not wealth. It was debt. Heavy, crushing debt. The moment they discovered what they had signed for, well, let's just say that was the beginning of their nightmare. And the next thing that happened that night, oh my dear friends, it was something none of them will ever forget. Because just as Linda raised her glass in victory, the front door burst open. The sound of the front door slamming against the wall echoed through the house like thunder. Everyone froze. Linda's glass stopped midair, her eyes wide. My sons shifted uneasily in their seats, their mouths half open, unsure whether to rise or remain seated. And then he walked in. It was David, my grandson, only 23 years old, but tall and fierce, with a fire in his eyes that reminded me so much of his grandfather. He was not supposed to be there that evening, at least, not according to Linda's plans. "Grandma," he said, his voice sharp. "What are you doing? Did you really sign those papers?" Before I could answer, Linda jumped in. "David, this is family business. Sit down and behave yourself. Your grandmother is tired and confused. We're helping her." David looked straight at her, and I could see his fists clench at his sides. Helping her? Or stealing from her? The room turned ice cold. Michael and Thomas exchanged glances, the kind that told me they were ashamed but unwilling to admit it. My boys had become weak in the face of greed, and Linda had used them like pawns. I reached out my hand, slow and steady. "David, come here." He walked to me, his jaw tight. When he sat beside me, I whispered, "Trust me. Everything is under control." He didn't understand, not yet. None of them did. But I had already set the game in motion long before this night. To ease the tension, I spoke. "Since we are all gathered here, let's eat first. We can discuss the company after dinner." Linda frowned. She wanted the glory of her victory immediately. But I knew how to play her game. I would let her feel in control for just a little longer. So we ate. Or rather, they pushed food around their plates while stealing glances at me and the folder sitting on the table. Linda couldn't help herself. She leaned forward and said, "Margaret, you don't have to worry anymore. We'll take care of the company. You can just rest, knit, and enjoy your final years." I smiled at her, a slow smile that I knew made her nervous. "Rest is for the weary, Linda. And as you can see, I'm not weary yet." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. When dinner ended, David insisted on helping me clear the table. In the kitchen, away from the others, he leaned close and whispered, "Grandma, what did you sign? Tell me the truth." I placed my hand on his cheek. "Patience, my dear. Soon they will know. And you will see why I signed with a smile." Before he could ask more, a loud crash came from the dining room. Dishes clattered to the floor. We rushed back in, and what I saw made my heart skip. Linda stood over the table, her face red, her hands shaking. The folder lay open, papers scattered everywhere. She was reading furiously, her lips moving, her eyes growing wilder with every line she read. Then, with a scream that pierced the air, she shouted, "What is this?" Her hands slammed the papers onto the table. Michael and Thomas jumped up, confused. "What's wrong?" Michael asked. Linda's voice cracked as she spat out the words. "These aren't ownership papers. They're debt contracts." Linda's scream rattled the walls. The sound of her voice was so sharp it could have sliced glass. She waved the papers in the air like they were poison, her face growing redder with each passing second. "These aren't ownership papers. These are debt contracts. This can't be real." Her hands shook so badly that the pages slipped from her fingers, fluttering across the floor like dead leaves in the wind. My children, my own flesh and blood, scrambled to pick them up, reading line after line, their faces twisting with disbelief. Michael's voice broke first. "Mom, what did you do?" Thomas stammered. This This says we're responsible for millions of dollars in debt and legal liabilities. Oh my God. Linda spun toward me, her eyes wild. You tricked us. You signed us into ruin. I sat back in my chair, calm as the sea before a storm, my hands folded neatly in my lap. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. No, Linda. You tricked yourself. You thought you could take what wasn't yours. And now you have exactly what you wanted. Control. David, my sweet grandson, stood beside me with his arms crossed, watching the scene like a soldier on guard. His face carried a proud but puzzled expression. He didn't fully understand yet, but he trusted me. Michael threw the papers on the table and shouted, "Mother, why would you do this? Why would you set us up like this?" I looked straight into his eyes. Because I raised you better than this. And if greed has blinded you, maybe responsibility will open your eyes. A company is not built only on money, but on sacrifice, sweat, and honor. And you forgot that. For a moment, silence swallowed the room. The only sound was Linda's breathing, sharp and uneven like a cornered animal. Then she slammed her fist on the table. This isn't over. You can't get away with this. I'll challenge this in court. I'll prove you're unfit. And I'll tear this company from your hands for real. I leaned forward slowly, my smile returning. Go ahead, Linda. But you might want to read the fine print before you open another door you can't close. Her eyes flickered with fear, though she tried to mask it with anger. She gathered the papers, stuffed them back into the folder, and stormed toward the door. Michael and Thomas followed, still arguing, their voices overlapping in a mess of panic. The moment the front door slammed shut behind them, peace returned to the room. I sighed deeply, leaning back in my chair. My body felt tired, but my spirit was lighter than it had been in years. David sat down beside me. Grandma, what just happened? What exactly did you do? I turned to him and spoke softly, the way my mother once spoke to me when teaching life's hardest lessons. I gave them what they asked for. They wanted power, so I handed it to them. But power without wisdom is like fire in the hands of a child. It will burn them before they can use it. He nodded slowly, still processing my words. I continued. Years ago, when I saw the greed in their eyes, I began shifting everything. The real company, the real assets, the true heart of what we built, it's safe. Hidden in a trust they cannot touch. What they signed tonight was an empty shell, filled with debts and broken contracts that I refused to carry. They wanted ownership? Now they own the weight of it. David's eyes widened. So you're saying they don't have the company at all? I smiled. They never had it. And they never will. For a while, we sat in silence, listening to the ticking of the old clock on the wall. I thought the night's drama was over, that perhaps I could rest. But fate has a way of twisting the knife when you least expect it. Just as I rose to clear the plates, there was another knock at the door. This one was not gentle. It was firm, heavy, the kind of knock that makes your heart pause for a beat. David stiffened. Who could that be at this hour? I walked slowly to the door, my cane tapping against the floor with each step. When I opened it, I found two men in dark suits standing on the porch. Their expressions were serious, their eyes sharp. Mrs. Collins? One of them asked. Yes, I replied. We're here on behalf of Sterling and Chase Law Firm. We need to discuss immediate financial matters regarding the contracts signed earlier this evening. My stomach tightened. I had prepared for this moment, but I didn't expect it so soon. Linda must have called them the very second she left my house. David stepped forward protectively. What financial matters? Who are you to show up at our home in the middle of the night? The taller man adjusted his tie. We represent creditors who have been waiting years for repayment. Now that legal ownership has changed hands, they are entitled to collect immediately. I stared at him unflinching. And what do you expect me to do about it? The man's lips curled slightly. Nothing, Mrs. Collins. You signed your rights away. But your family? They're about to face consequences far greater than they imagined. David clenched his fists. Are you threatening my grandmother? The shorter man shook his head calmly. Not at all. We're simply informing her. The contracts are binding. By tomorrow morning, collection efforts will begin. My heart raced, but I forced myself to remain steady. I knew this was coming, but the speed of it caught even me off guard. As the men turned to leave, the taller one paused and looked back at me. "One more thing, Mrs. Collins. Tell your family this. Running away will not save them. We always collect." The words sent a chill through the air. When the door closed, David turned to me, panic in his eyes. "Grandma, what does this mean? What's going to happen to them?" I walked slowly back to the table, my knees weak but my spirit strong. I sat down and whispered, "It means, my dear, that the storm has only begun. And storms have a way of washing away the weak and revealing who is truly strong." David sat beside me, his jaw tight. "But Grandma, what if the storm hits us too?" I placed my hand over his. "Then we'll stand firm. Because unlike them, we have nothing to hide and nothing to fear." The night grew darker, silence filling the house again. But deep down, I knew the peace wouldn't last. Linda was not the type to surrender quietly. She would fight. Michael and Thomas, blinded by shame, would follow her lead. And soon, the true battle would begin. Not just for the company, but for the soul of our family. And then, just as I thought the night was ending, the phone rang. Its shrill sound cut through the stillness, making both David and I jump. I reached for it, my hand trembling slightly as I lifted the receiver. A voice hissed on the other end. A voice I knew all too well. "Margaret," Linda snarled. "You think you're clever. But you've just started a war. And I promise you, by the time I'm finished, you'll regret ever crossing me." The line went dead. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto the table. David rushed to pick it up, but the line was already dead. His eyes were sharp, his jaw locked. "Grandma, she's serious. She's not going to stop." I leaned back slowly, steadying my breath. "I know, David. That woman's greed has no bottom. But threats don't scare me. I've seen worse storms." He pulled out a chair and sat across from me. "But she has my uncles on her side. And now these creditors. What if she actually tries to drag you into court?" I chuckled softly, though my heart was pounding. "Then let her. Courtrooms aren't ruled by greed. They're ruled by evidence. And I've kept every receipt, every contract, every record from the day your grandfather and I started this business. She can twist words, but she cannot twist the truth." David nodded, though worry lingered on his face. I reached across the table, placing my wrinkled hand over his. "Listen to me, child. She may have fire in her, but we have roots. And roots always outlast flames." Just then, headlights flashed across the living room window. A car had pulled into the driveway. David jumped to his feet, peering through the curtain. His voice dropped low. "It's them. Uncle Michael and Uncle Thomas, and Linda's with them." My stomach sank. They had come back, faster than I expected. And this time, they weren't coming to talk. The car doors slammed. Heavy footsteps crunched on the gravel, growing louder with every step toward the porch. David turned to me, his voice tense. "Grandma, stay behind me. Something about this doesn't feel right." Before I could answer, fists pounded on the door. Hard, angry, relentless. "Mother!" Michael's voice roared. "Open this door now." Then Thomas's voice, trembling but loud. "We're not leaving until you explain yourself." And finally Linda's cold hiss, cutting through the night. "If you don't open this door, Margaret, I'll make sure you regret it in ways you can't even imagine." The pounding grew louder, shaking the door on its hinges. David reached for the lock, but I grabbed his arm. "No," he whispered. Because deep inside I knew whatever was about to happen on the other side of that door would change everything. The pounding shook the door again, harder this time. David stood ready, his shoulders tense, his jaw clenched. He looked at me, waiting for my command. "Don't open it," I whispered. "Not yet." But the pounding didn't stop. It grew louder, more furious, as if they meant to break the door off its hinges. The house trembled under the weight of their rage. "Mother!" Michael's voice thundered again. "You tricked us. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I held David's arm to keep him steady. "Patience," I told him. "Let them sweat. Let them feel the weight of their own choices before they step foot in here." But then came Linda's voice, sharp and venomous. "Margaret, if you don't open this door, I swear we'll drag you to court tomorrow. We'll strip you of everything, including this house." Her words were like icy water, But I didn't flinch. I knew Linda's game, threats first, destruction later. She was trying to scare me into submission. But fear is a choice, and I had chosen long ago never to give her that satisfaction. Finally, I rose from my chair, my cane tapping against the wooden floor as I walked toward the door. David followed, his body shielding me as though I were fragile porcelain. When I reached the door, I placed my hand on the knob and whispered, "Whatever happens next, keep calm." I opened it. The cold night air swept in, carrying with it the smell of car exhaust and bitterness. Michael and Thomas stood there, their faces pale, twisted with confusion and anger. Behind them, Linda's eyes gleamed with the hunger of a predator who thought she had cornered her prey. "Mother," Michael barked. "How could you sign us into debt? You ruined us." Thomas's voice trembled, almost breaking. I can't sleep knowing I'm responsible for millions. My life is over before it's even begun." Linda pushed between them and stepped into the house without waiting for permission. Her heels clicked against the floor like hammers. She slammed the folder down on the table and pointed at me. "You think you're clever, don't you?" she spat. "But I'll fix this. I'll find a way to prove you're unfit, and when I do, that trust you're hiding behind will crumble. You've made your last move." I raised an eyebrow. "Trust? What trust?" Her face twitched. She realized she had revealed more than she intended. My smile must have stung because she leaned closer, her voice dropping low. "Don't play games with me, old woman. I know you've hidden the real company. I'll find it. And when I do, everything you've built will finally be mine." David stepped forward, his chest heaving. "You won't touch my grandmother. Not now, not ever." Linda scoffed. "And who are you, boy? A child playing at being a man? This is business, grown-up business." I placed my hand on David's arm before he could lash out. "No, Linda. This is family. And that's what you'll never understand." Michael groaned, pulling at his hair. "Mother, please. Just fix this. Call the lawyers. Cancel the contracts. Do something." My heart ached to see him like that. My son, once so full of promise, now drowning in fear of responsibility. But this was the lesson he needed. Some debts cannot be erased. Some burdens must be carried before a man learns to stand tall. I spoke firmly. "Michael, Thomas, you wanted ownership, and you signed for it. That means you own the weight as much as you would have owned the wealth. That's the price of greed." Thomas's face turned red. "We're your children. How can you do this to us?" I looked at him with sorrow. "I didn't do this to you. You did it to yourself, when you let greed blind your heart." The room grew still, the air thick with anger and regret. Linda stood rigid, calculating her next move. I could see it in her eyes. She was already planning something darker, something beyond words and papers. And then the silence shattered. A rock came crashing through the living room window, shattering glass across the floor. David jumped back, pulling me to safety as shards scattered like diamonds in the light. Everyone gasped. From outside, a voice shouted, "This is just the beginning. Pay up or pay the price." We rushed to the broken window. In the distance, headlights flickered, and a car sped away down the street. David clenched his fists. "It's them, the creditors. They're not waiting for court. They're coming after us now." Linda's face drained of color. For the first time that night, she looked truly afraid. "You mean they'll come to our houses?" I turned slowly, meeting her eyes. "Yes, Linda. They'll come. They don't care about your schemes or your pride. They only care about collecting. And they will collect." The room fell into silence again. But this time it wasn't anger that filled it. It was fear, cold, heavy fear that pressed down on everyone like a storm cloud ready to burst. And as the wind whistled through the broken window, I knew one thing for certain. The war had spilled out of our dining room and into the world beyond. And the next strike would be worse. The wind howled through the broken window, carrying with it the faint smell of gasoline from the car that had just roared away. The shards of glass sparkled across the floor like tiny daggers. David helped me sit back down while his eyes stayed fixed on the street, alert as a guard dog. Michael was pacing the room, pulling at his hair. "This is insane. They can't just throw rocks through people's windows. This isn't how business works." Linda snapped at him. "Wake up, Michael. These aren't polite bankers. These are collectors. They don't wait for judges and paperwork. They take what they want by force. Her words made Thomas sink into a chair, his face pale. Oh God, what have we gotten ourselves into? I folded my hands, watching them crumble under the weight of their choices. You wanted control, I said softly. Now you see what control looks like when it's poisoned by greed. This is only the beginning. David's voice was steady, though his eyes burned. Grandma, we need to call the police. Linda laughed bitterly. The police? And what will you tell them? That we signed contracts we didn't understand? That criminals are collecting on debts we agreed to take? Do you think the police care about that? She was right and she knew it. The law could only do so much. Debt collectors like these lived in the shadows, where rules bent and broke without consequence. Michael stopped pacing and turned to me. Desperation in his eyes. Mother, please. You have to save us. Tell us where the real company is. Show us how to get out of this. We can't fight them. I shook my head slowly. No, Michael. I won't hand over what's left of your father's legacy to wolves. If you want to survive this, you'll have to learn to stand on your own. That's the only way. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the ticking clock. Then suddenly the front porch light flickered. Once, twice, then went out completely. David's head snapped toward the door. His voice dropped. Grandma, someone's outside. Before anyone could move, the door rattled violently, as though someone was testing the lock. We all froze. And then a shadow passed across the window frame, tall and broad, followed by another. Linda gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. They're here. The doorknob twisted slowly, and a low voice growled from the other side. Open up. It's time to settle your debt. The doorknob rattled again, harder this time. The growling voice outside repeated. Open up. It's time to settle your debt. My heart thudded against my ribs, but I forced my breath to stay steady. David moved instinctively in front of me, his fists clenched, his stance wide like a soldier bracing for battle. Michael whispered frantically, What do we do? What do we do? Linda hissed at him. Shut up. Don't sound weak. But her trembling hands betrayed her fear. The shadows outside shifted, and another voice, lower, more menacing, spoke. If you don't open this door, we'll open it for you. I rose slowly, leaning on my cane. Stay calm, I whispered to everyone. Panic feeds wolves. And these men are nothing but wolves. The pounding came again, 3 hard, thunderous knocks that shook the frame. David leaned closer to me. Grandma, I can fight if I have to. I touched his arm. You won't fight. Not yet. Words are stronger than fists, at least at the beginning. With every ounce of courage I had left in me, I stepped toward the door and called out. Who are you? Show your faces. For a moment, silence. Then one of the men outside chuckled darkly. Names don't matter. Debts do. Your family owes, and we've come to collect. Linda's face drained of color. Oh my God, they know. David's voice thundered back. You're not coming in here. The man's chuckle turned into a growl. Then you'll pay in other ways. Suddenly, the sound of a car door slammed outside. Another set of footsteps approached, lighter, quicker. A new voice rang out, sharp, commanding. Step away from that door. Everyone inside froze. Through the broken window, I saw a flashlight beam sweep across the porch. A man in a dark jacket appeared, his badge glinting in the light. Sheriff's Department, he barked. What's going on here? The 2 shadows at my door hesitated. One muttered something under his breath. Then both backed away quickly, retreating toward their car. Tires screeched as the vehicle sped off into the night. Relief flooded the room like water breaking through a dam. Thomas collapsed into a chair, breathing hard. Michael sagged against the wall, sweat dripping down his forehead. The deputy knocked gently. Ma'am, are you all right? We got a call about suspicious activity in the area. I opened the door carefully this time, and he stepped inside. He was tall, middle-aged, with sharp eyes that scanned the room quickly. The broken window, the frightened faces, the scattered papers. Looks like I arrived just in time, he said. Anyone want to explain? Linda, quick as always, jumped in. Officer, thank you for coming. Those men were threatening us. They're criminals. He tilted his head. Criminals? And why would they be at your house tonight? Her tongue twisted. She glanced at me, then at the papers still on the table. Her lips pressed tight. She couldn't admit the truth. I stepped forward calmly. They came because of debts. Debts that my family now owns. I believe they'll be back. The deputy's eyes narrowed. Debts. Michael cut in desperately. It's all a mistake. We didn't know what we were signing. He stopped, realizing too late that blaming me would only dig him deeper. The deputy looked at him hard, then back at me. Ma'am, I suggest you stay somewhere safe tonight. If these men are who I think they are, they don't scare easy. Linda's voice cracked. Wait, you know them? The deputy sighed. We've had reports. They're not your usual collectors. They work for someone bigger, someone dangerous. They don't just want money. They want leverage. Families like yours make easy targets. My blood ran cold. Leverage? He nodded grimly. They'll use whatever they can, fear, threats, property, even people. So I'm warning you, this isn't over. The room went silent again. David's hand tightened into a fist. We're not running. If they come back, we'll be ready. The deputy gave him a long, measuring look. Son, bravery is good. Foolish bravery will get you killed. Think carefully. He handed me his card. Call me if anything happens again. And I mean anything. With that he left, his car lights fading into the night. When the door shut, the house felt darker than ever. Linda immediately turned on me. See what you've done? You've put all of us in danger. If they come after us, it's your fault. I glared at her. No, Linda. It's your greed that opened this door. Don't you dare lay this at my feet. Michael sank into the sofa, covering his face. We're doomed, they'll come back, and next time, no deputy will save us. Thomas muttered. We should just run. Pack up and leave tonight. But David slammed his palm against the table. No. We're not running. If we run, they'll chase us forever. We need to face this head on. I looked at him, pride swelling in my chest. At least one soul in this family still carried strength. But before I could speak, headlights flashed across the broken window again. Another car had pulled into the driveway. Linda gasped. They're back. David rushed to the window, peering out. His face hardened, then twisted in shock. Grandma, he whispered, turning to me. It's not them. It's worse. I rose slowly, my cane trembling in my hand. What do you mean? He swallowed hard. It's him. The front door creaked open, and a familiar figure stepped into the house, someone none of us expected to see again. The door swung wider, and in stepped a figure I hadn't seen in years. My breath caught in my chest. It was Richard's brother, my late husband's estranged sibling, Edward Collins. His tall frame filled the doorway, his gray hair slicked back, his eyes as cold as steel. He carried himself with that same smug confidence he had when Richard was alive, the kind of man who never entered a room quietly. Linda's eyes lit up like firecrackers. Edward! She gasped, rushing toward him as if he were a savior. You're here. Thank God you're here. David's jaw clenched. Grandma, who is he? I steadied my cane, my voice low and heavy. Your great-uncle Edward. The one your grandfather never trusted. Edward smirked at me, his lips curling into a half-smile. Still sharp, Margaret. I see age hasn't dulled your memory. The room grew stiff with tension. Michael and Thomas shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between me and their uncle. They hadn't seen him since they were children, but the stories of his greed, his scheming were not forgotten. What are you doing here? I asked firmly. Edward took a few steps inside, his polished shoes echoing on the wooden floor. I heard about your little situation, the debts, the collectors, the chaos, and I thought to myself, perhaps this is the moment the Collins empire finally returns to the hands it should have been in all along. David bristled. You mean your hands? Edward chuckled. Smart boy. You must be Richard's grandson. You've got the fire, I'll give you that. But fire without guidance? It burns everything it touches. Linda, ever the opportunist, slipped to his side. Edward, you can help us, can't you? You've always been a man of resources. You can take control and make this right. Her eagerness made my stomach twist. She was already shifting her loyalty like a rat jumping ships. Edward glanced at her, then at my sons. Yes, I could help, but not for free. I want full control of the company, whatever scraps are left of it, and the trust Margaret is hiding. Hand it over and I'll clean up your mess. Michael's face lit with desperate hope. That's it. That's the answer, Thomas. He can save us. Thomas, pale and trembling, nodded slowly. Maybe it's the only way. I slammed my cane against the floor, the sound cracking like a whip. No. My voice cut through the air, sharp and fierce. Over my dead body will Edward Collins ever touch what Richard and I built? He was poison then and he's poison now. Edward's eyes narrowed, his smirk fading. Careful, Margaret. You may not have much strength left to fight me. David stepped between us, his fists clenched. She doesn't need strength. She has me. For a brief moment, the room was split down the middle. Me and David on one side, Linda clinging to Edward on the other, and my two sons wavering in between like frightened children. The air was heavy with choice. Then Edward leaned forward, his voice low but dangerous. You can resist all you want, Margaret. But I didn't come alone. Before anyone could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed outside. Many footsteps. The front porch creaked under the weight of several men. Edward's smirk returned as he glanced at the door. You see, Margaret, unlike you, I know how to collect debts. The doorknob turned, and one by one, dark silhouettes began to step into my home. The first man who stepped into my living room was huge, broad shoulders, thick arms, a scar slashing across his jaw. His boots thudded against the wooden floor like the sound of a hammer. 3 more followed him, each one just as grim, dressed in dark coats, their eyes sharp and hungry. The air shifted. It was no longer a family home. It was a battlefield. Edward stood tall, smug satisfaction written across his face as he spread his arms. Margaret, meet my associates. These gentlemen understand the language of loyalty, and unlike your fragile family, they do not hesitate when orders are given. Linda scurried closer to him, her hands clasped like she had found her savior. Edward, you'll protect us from those other men, won't you? You'll keep them away? Edward glanced at her with a look of amusement. Of course, Linda. But protection always has a price. Michael, pale and sweating, blurted. We'll pay it. Whatever it takes, we'll pay. Just tell us what you want. I looked at him with such disappointment. My heart ached. My sons had grown into weak men, their fear drowning any shred of dignity left in them. Edward's eyes glittered. I want control of everything Richard left behind. Every document, every account, every key. You sign it over, and my friends here will make sure the collectors vanish. Refuse, he motioned to the men, who cracked their knuckles and grinned. And things get unpleasant. David stepped forward, fire burning in his eyes. You can threaten us all you want, but Grandma isn't handing you a thing. Edward chuckled softly. Ah, youth. So bold. So reckless. Do you think you can fight 4 trained men with your bare hands? David didn't flinch. I don't care if it's 4 or 40. You won't touch her. The largest man took a step closer to David, his shadow swallowing my grandson's frame. My grip tightened on my cane. I could see David's muscles tense, ready for the blow that might come at any second. But before fists could fly, I raised my voice. Enough! The word rang through the room like a bell. Even Edward's men paused. I looked Edward straight in the eye, my voice steady though my heart thundered. You think this family is weak because you see fear on their faces. But you underestimate the power of truth. You see, Edward, Richard, and I built our lives on something you never understood. Honor. And honor doesn't bend to threats. Edward smirked. Honor? Honor doesn't pay debts, Margaret. I stepped closer, leaning on my cane but holding my ground. No. But honor builds legacies. And yours will be nothing but ashes. For a flicker of a moment, I saw his face tighten. Just a flicker, but enough. Edward hated being reminded of the truth he'd spent his life burying. That Richard had chosen me, not him, to share in the Collins empire. Michael's voice cracked, breaking the tension. Mother, stop provoking him. Please. We can't fight this. We should just give him what he wants. Edward's smirk returned. Listen to your son, Margaret. He has sense. But David snapped, his voice fierce. No, he has fear. And fear is what got us into this mess. He turned on his uncles, his eyes blazing. You signed away Grandma's company because you were cowards. And now you're about to hand everything over to a vulture because you're still cowards. Thomas's face flushed red. You don't understand, David. You've never been responsible for a family. You've never had the weight of survival on your shoulders. David's fists trembled at his side. Survival without dignity isn't survival. It's slavery. The room erupted into shouting. David and Thomas yelling, Michael pleading, Linda whispering in Edward's ear like a snake feeding poison. And through it all Edward stood calm, watching the chaos with a predator's eyes. His men shifted, waiting for his signal to strike. I knew what he was doing. He wanted the family to destroy itself while he stood by and collected the pieces. I slammed my cane on the floor again. The sound silenced them. Enough! I barked. You all want to sell your souls to escape fear. But I won't. If you want my signature, Edward, you'll have to take it from my cold, dead hands. The room froze. My words hung heavy in the air. Edward's smirk faded into something darker. His eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched. Slowly, he nodded to the scarred man. Take it from her, he said coldly. The man stepped forward, his hand reaching toward me. David roared and lunged, shoving the man back. The two crashed into the table, papers flying across the room. Thomas screamed. Michael ducked. Linda shrieked. Chaos exploded. Another thug grabbed David from behind, yanking him backward. David twisted, elbowing him in the ribs, but the man barely flinched. Fists flew, bodies collided, furniture shattered. I tried to move closer, my cane raised, but one of the men blocked me, his shadow towering over mine. Edward stood in the corner, watching with cold satisfaction. This is what happens, Margaret. This is the cost of your stubbornness. Then, in the middle of the chaos, the front window shattered with a deafening crash. Everyone froze. A smoke canister rolled across the floor, hissing, filling the room with thick, choking clouds. The thugs coughed, stumbling back. My family shouted, disoriented. Edward cursed, covering his mouth. Through the smoke, a new voice thundered. Sheriff's Department. Everyone down. Dark figures in tactical gear stormed the house, their flashlights slicing through the smoke. The sound of boots, the clatter of weapons, commands barked with authority. The men Edward had brought froze, then raised their hands reluctantly. For the first time that night, Edward's smirk disappeared completely. His face twisted with fury as two deputies seized his arms and slammed him against the wall. I coughed, tears streaming from my eyes, but relief surged through me. Salvation had arrived. But just as I thought it was over, one of the officers pulled off his helmet, and my blood turned to ice. It wasn't the sheriff. It was someone else. Someone I never wanted to see again. The helmet came off, and through the haze of smoke I saw the face I thought I'd buried in the past. It was Daniel, my own son, the one who had left years ago, swearing he wanted nothing to do with me, the company, or this family ever again. He had disappeared into shadows, chasing a life I could never follow. And now he stood before me, dressed in tactical black, with a badge pinned to his chest that gleamed in the dim light. Mother, he said coolly, as if he were greeting an old neighbor, not a woman who had once carried him in her arms. My heart lurched, confusion and dread swirling together. Daniel, what are you doing here? David's head snapped toward him. Wait, you're a cop? Daniel smirked faintly, though his eyes remained cold. Not exactly. Let's just say I work with people who solve problems the law can't. Edward, pinned against the wall by deputies, suddenly laughed, a low, bitter sound. Of course. Of course. The prodigal son returns, on the payroll of the very men who own me. The room went still. My breath caught. What do you mean by that? I demanded. Edward sneered. Your darling Daniel isn't here to save you, Margaret. He's here to collect. Those men outside? The ones who came knocking earlier tonight? They answer to the same boss as him. Linda gasped, her face blanching. No, that can't be true. But the way Daniel's jaw tightened told me everything I needed to know. Mother, Daniel said, his voice low but steady. I told you years ago, if you kept clinging to that company it would destroy you. Now you've dragged everyone else into the fire. I'm here to end it. David stepped in front of me, fury in his eyes. End it? By threatening your own family. Daniel's gaze hardened. By taking what should have been mine from the start. Those words cut deeper than any knife. The boy I raised, the child I once prayed over at night, was standing before me as a stranger, a vulture circling his own blood. Edward chuckled darkly. Looks like you're not the only wolf in this family, Margaret. How fitting. Daniel turned sharply toward him, and for a moment I thought he might strike his uncle. Instead, he nodded to the men flanking him. Take Edward outside. He's of no use anymore. The deputies dragged Edward toward the door, his protests fading into the night. But as they left, Daniel's eyes returned to me, colder than ice. Now, Mother, it's just us. David squared his shoulders, refusing to move. If you want her, you'll have to go through me. Daniel's lips curved into a faint, chilling smile. So be it. And then, without warning, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A legal document. He held it out toward me. Sign this, Margaret. Transfer the company, the trust, everything into my name. You've fought enough battles. This is where it ends. I looked at him, my hands trembling. And if I refuse? Daniel leaned closer, his voice sharp as a blade. Then I'll show you just how far your son is willing to go. The room fell into suffocating silence. My blood ran cold, because in that moment I realized Daniel wasn't bluffing. The paper in Daniel's hand seemed to glow under the dim light of the shattered room. The edges curled slightly, as though even the document itself was eager to consume what was left of my family's legacy. Sign it, Daniel ordered again, his voice calm but firm. The kind of calm that comes when a man is holding a winning card. David planted his feet like a tree rooted deep in the earth. She's not signing anything. Daniel's eyes slid toward him with a trace of pity, as though my grandson's defiance was nothing more than a child refusing bedtime. David, I admire your loyalty. But loyalty without power is just wasted breath. This isn't your fight. It's between me and her. I straightened my back, refusing to let the tremor in my legs betray me. No, Daniel. It's not just between you and me. It's between you and every drop of blood in this house. Linda, who had been silently trembling near the corner, suddenly piped up, her voice shrill. Why fight it, Margaret? He's your son. At least if you give it to him, it stays in the family. Isn't that better than strangers taking everything? Her words twisted like a knife. I turned my gaze sharply on her. Better to lose it to strangers than hand it to a traitor. Daniel smirked faintly. And there it is. That sharp tongue. Always cutting, always judging. You never did see me as good enough, did you? His words hit me like stones. Memories flooded back. Daniel as a boy, standing outside Richard's study, waiting for approval that never came. Daniel, restless, bitter, always feeling overshadowed by his father's high standards and his mother's stubborn faith. I swallowed hard. Daniel, I never doubted you. I only feared what you would become if you kept walking the path you chose. And tonight, I see that fear has come true. He flinched, just barely, but enough for me to know the words struck him. Still, he pressed the paper closer. Last chance, Mother. Sign, or I will take more than your company. I'll take the peace you think you've earned. I'll take David. I'll take everything. David growled. You touch me and... Daniel cut him off with a sharp wave of his hand. The men flanking him stepped forward, their boots pounding the floor like war drums. Thomas finally found his voice, though it trembled with every word. Daniel, please don't do this. We're brothers. Whatever anger you have, let's settle it another way. Daniel turned his gaze on Thomas, eyes narrowing. Brothers? You and Michael sold Mother's company to parasites. Don't talk to me about family when you've already betrayed it. Michael's face went pale, guilt pressing on him like a stone. He stammered. We didn't know, we just thought. Exactly, Daniel snapped. You didn't think. And now I'm the one cleaning up your mess. So don't preach to me about loyalty. Linda edged closer to Daniel, clutching his arm. Edward was wrong. He's poison. But you can fix this. You can save us. Just don't turn on me too. I nearly spat. The cowardice was suffocating. She had latched onto whoever looked most powerful, like a moth flitting from flame to flame. Daniel, however, didn't even glance at her. His eyes were locked on me. Mother. Pen. Paper. Now. I felt the weight of my cane in my hand. My body screamed with weariness, but my spirit burned with the fire Richard had always admired in me. I wasn't going to bend, not now, not ever. I raised my chin. You may have abandoned me, Daniel, but I will never abandon what your father built. If you want my signature, you'll have to tear it from my lifeless hand. The silence that followed was heavy, almost unbearable. Then Daniel's lips curled into a smile, not warm but cruel. He nodded once to his men. In an instant, one of them lunged toward David, shoving him hard against the wall. Another gripped Michael's arm, twisting it until he cried out. Thomas stumbled back, falling over a chair. Linda screamed. I gasped, moving forward, but one of the thugs blocked me, his bulk towering over mine. Daniel's voice cut through the chaos. I warned you. Now you'll watch your family pay for your stubbornness. David roared, struggling against the man pinning him, his fists flailing. Grandma! Don't give him anything. Don't you dare. Tears burned my eyes, but my hands did not tremble. I won't, David. I won't. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. This is your last chance, Mother. Save them, or lose them. My heart pounded, torn between love for my family and loyalty to the truth Richard and I had built. But before I could speak, there was a sudden crash. The back door of the house burst open. Another figure stormed in, drenched from the night rain, his clothes torn, his face bruised but determined. Every head in the room turned. My breath caught in my throat, because standing there against all odds was someone we had all believed was gone forever. And his return was about to change everything. The figure staggered into the room, dripping rainwater onto the cracked floorboards. For a moment no one breathed. Then the impossible sank in. It was Richard, my husband, the man we had buried 10 years ago. Or so we believed. His hair was silver now, his face lined with scars time hadn't spared him from. But his eyes, those piercing blue eyes that had once commanded boardrooms and silenced enemies, they burned with the same fire I remembered. Good God, Thomas whispered, his face draining of color. Dad. Michael's knees buckled, and he collapsed into a chair. Linda gasped, clutching her chest. David stood frozen, wide-eyed, as if the ground beneath him had been torn away. Grandpa? But it was Daniel who reacted most violently. His face contorted, shock twisting into fury. No, this isn't real. You're dead. Richard's voice rolled across the room, deep and steady, though tinged with exhaustion. You wanted me dead, Daniel. That's why you left. That's why you joined them. But death didn't take me. Not yet. Daniel's hands shook as he pointed at him. You're lying. You're a ghost. Richard stepped forward, his eyes narrowing on his son. No, Daniel. I'm the father you betrayed. And I've come back to finish what you started. The room erupted into chaos. The thugs tightened their grip on my sons, unsure whether to follow Daniel's orders or retreat. Linda whimpered like a frightened child, torn between fear and disbelief. I couldn't move. My cane trembled in my grip, but my heart pounded with a strange mixture of terror and hope. After all these years of loneliness, of carrying his legacy alone, Richard was here. Alive. Let them go, Richard commanded the men, his voice sharp with authority. Now. For the briefest moment, they hesitated, caught between the son who paid them and the father who radiated the kind of power that couldn't be bought. Daniel snapped, his voice cracking with desperation. Don't listen to him. He's nothing. Hold them down. But Richard's presence was like thunder. He took another step forward, water dripping from his coat, and every eye followed him. Your fight is with me, Daniel, he said. It always has been. Daniel's face twisted with rage. He raised his hand as if signaling his men to attack, but his voice trembled. Then let's finish it. The room went still. Father against son. Blood against blood. And in that breathless silence, I realized that the storm raging outside had finally broken through our walls, and it was about to consume us all. The rain outside hammered the windows like fists, and lightning flashed across the sky. illuminating the two men facing each other. Richard and Daniel, father and son. Two storms colliding under one roof. Richard's voice was steady, almost eerily calm. You've spent years running from me, Daniel. From the truth. But you can't run anymore. Daniel's jaw clenched, his hands trembling as he gripped the paper he had tried to force on me. The truth? The truth is that you chose your company over your family. You chose your legacy over your own son. Richard's eyes darkened, the weight of 1,000 unspoken regrets pressing down on the room. No.
I chose integrity over greed.
I chose honor over lies. But you. His voice rose, filled with the force of years of disappointment. You chose to betray the very blood that gave you life. David's voice cut through the tension. Grandpa, wait please. Don't let this tear us apart any worse than it already has. But neither man heard him. Their eyes were locked, like two predators circling before the strike. Linda wrung her hands, whispering frantically, Richard, stop this madness. Let Daniel take the company. It'll save us all. Her words were oil on fire. Richard's gaze snapped toward her, sharp as a blade. Linda, you always did bow to whoever looked strongest. But mark my words. You'll bow your head to the grave if you keep following Daniel. She flinched, retreating a step, her face pale. Daniel sneered, seizing the moment. There it is. The great Richard Collins, still barking orders, still belittling, still acting like his word is law. Do you know what it was like growing up in your shadow? Do you know how it felt to never be good enough? Richard's face softened for the first time. He took a slow step forward. Daniel, you were always good enough. You just wanted the world handed to you instead of earned. That's what poisoned you. Not me. Daniel's lips quivered, torn between rage and grief. For a moment, I saw the little boy he once was, the boy who used to tug on Richard's sleeve, begging to ride on his shoulders. But that moment shattered like glass. His voice dropped cold and sharp. No. What poisoned me was watching you give her. He jabbed a finger toward me. Everything. You loved her more than your own blood. I gasped, my chest tightening. Daniel, that's not true. I loved you with everything I had. His eyes burned as he turned on me. You loved the company. You loved David because he reminded you of him. But me? I was just the son who could never measure up. Lightning cracked, throwing the room into stark white light. Richard's fists clenched at his sides. If you truly believe that, Daniel, then tonight will decide everything. At his signal, two of Daniel's men surged forward toward Richard. David leapt in front of his grandfather, blocking the path. If you want him, you'll have to go through me. The room erupted in chaos. David's fist connected with one thug's jaw, sending him sprawling. The other grabbed David by the collar, slamming him against the wall. Richard lunged, surprising everyone with the strength still in his body, tackling the man off his grandson. Michael cowered in the corner, shouting, Stop! Please stop! While Thomas tried in vain to pull Linda back from the fray. Daniel stood at the center, watching with a twisted expression, half anguish, half satisfaction. His family tearing itself apart was proof, in his mind, that he had always been right. I tried to move forward, my cane raised, but a heavy hand shoved me back into my chair. My body trembled, but my voice did not. Daniel, you'll destroy us all if you don't stop. He didn't answer. He only reached inside his coat and pulled out a gun. The room froze. The crackle of thunder outside was nothing compared to the silence that followed. David, panting and bruised, froze mid-swing. Richard's eyes locked onto the weapon, his body tensing. Daniel's hand shook, the barrel wavering as he pointed it first at his father, then at me, then back again. I never wanted it to come to this. But you forced my hand. Tears burned my eyes. Daniel, don't do this. His voice cracked, though his grip didn't falter. All my life I've been second place. Tonight, I take what I'm owed. Richard stepped forward, his voice low, steady, commanding. If you're going to pull that trigger, Daniel, then look me in the eye when you do it. Look your father in the eye and know you've killed what little was left of him. Daniel's chest heaved, his finger twitching on the trigger. His face contorted with rage, grief, and something else, fear. Lightning flashed again, the thunder rattling the very walls. And then, A deafening gunshot split the air. The room screamed with echoes. But it wasn't clear who had been hit. The gunshot rang in my ears, deafening, swallowing every other sound in the room. For a moment no one moved. Then David cried out. Blood stained his shirt where the bullet had grazed his side. He staggered, clutching his ribs, but he didn't fall. David! I screamed, lurching forward. My cane slipped from my grasp as I tried to reach him. Daniel's face twisted. That wasn't who he meant to hit. His hand trembled more violently now, the gun shaking like it weighed 100 pounds. Richard moved with sudden force, shoving David behind him. Enough! His voice was thunder, booming final. Daniel, you've crossed a line you can never return from. David gritted his teeth, blood seeping between his fingers. But his eyes burned with defiance. I'm fine. I won't let him win. The thugs wavered, looking at each other uneasily. Even Linda sobbed openly, hiding her face. Only Daniel stood frozen, trapped between rage and disbelief. You don't understand. Daniel shouted, his voice breaking. This was never supposed to happen. You all left me no choice. Richard stepped closer. Each word steady and deliberate. You always had a choice. And you chose betrayal. Daniel's eyes darted around the room, as though searching for a way out. His grip on the gun slipped, then tightened again. Sweat poured down his face, mixing with tears he refused to admit were falling. Put it down, son, Richard said quietly, holding out his hand. It doesn't have to end this way. For a breathless moment, I thought Daniel might listen. His arm wavered, the weapon drooping slightly. His eyes met Richard's, and I saw a flicker of the lost boy he once was, desperate for love and acceptance. Then thunder shook the house again, and the flicker was gone. No. Daniel roared. If I can't have it all, then none of you will. He swung the gun wildly toward me. I gasped, frozen in place. But before he could pull the trigger, Richard lunged. The two men crashed together, the gun clattering to the floor. The sound of their struggle filled the room, grunts, fists landing, with splintering as they slammed against the table. The thugs bolted, scrambling out into the storm, leaving chaos behind them. Linda shrieked and pressed herself into a corner, while Michael cowered behind her. David tried to stand, pain etched across his face, but Thomas held him back. You'll bleed out if you move. Richard pinned Daniel to the floor, his fist raised high. For a moment, I thought he might strike the final blow. His chest heaved, his jaw clenched, and every muscle in his body trembled with the weight of fury and years of betrayal. But then he froze. His fist hovered, shaking in the air. I'm still your father, Richard whispered, almost to himself. Daniel glared up at him, panting heavily. Then finish it. Because I'll never stop. Silence hung like a blade. And then another sound. A sharp click. Every head turned. It was Linda. She stood in the corner, trembling, but in her hands was the gun Daniel had dropped. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, but her hands were steady as she raised it, aimed not at Daniel but at Richard. You don't get to control us anymore, she hissed. Not you. Not him. It's our turn. The room went still. And for the second time that night, the barrel of a gun decided all of our fates. The gun in Linda's hands gleamed under the lightning's flash. Her fingers curled tight around the handle, her arms surprisingly steady for a woman who had spent the last hour trembling in fear. The room stilled. Even the rain seemed to hush, waiting to see who would survive this night. Linda. Richard's voice was calm, though his chest rose and fell heavily from the fight with Daniel. His eyes stayed locked on hers, reading her as if she were a book he had written himself. Put it down. You don't know what you're doing. Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing, Linda hissed, her voice sharp with venom. I've spent years watching you command everything. Watching you treat the rest of us like pawns. You think I was just standing in Daniel's shadow? No. I was waiting. Waiting for the moment when I could finally hold the power. Thomas's voice cracked, his hands raised pleadingly. Mom, stop. Don't do this. You'll regret it. She didn't even glance at him. Her entire being was focused on Richard, as if her entire life had led to this one point. Daniel, still pinned beneath his father, let out a hoarse laugh. Do it, mother. End him. End both of them. His eyes glittered with a strange madness. Then the company is ours. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it might burst. Linda, listen to me, I said, my voice breaking. If you pull that trigger, you won't just be ending a life, you'll be ending yours. There's no coming back from this. But her face twisted, a mask of bitterness and rage. You've had your say, old woman. Now it's my turn. The barrel of the gun rose, her finger tightening on the trigger. And then, no. David's roar shook the room as he hurled himself forward. Ignoring his wound, he slammed into Linda just as the gun went off. The bullet tore into the ceiling, with splintering above us. The gun clattered to the floor, skidding across the room. Linda shrieked, clawing at David, but his strength, fueled by desperation, overpowered her. He pinned her wrists, his face pale with pain but his voice steady. You don't get to destroy us. Not tonight. Richard seized the moment. With one final surge, he wrenched Daniel up from the floor and slammed him against the wall. His eyes bore into his son's. This ends now, Daniel thrashed, his voice hoarse with rage. You think you've won? You think any of this matters? When the courts see those papers, when they see she signed, everything will be ours. A cold smile spread across Richard's face. That's where you're wrong, son. He reached into his soaked coat and pulled out a folder, battered but intact. He tossed it onto the table, the pages spilling out like a storm of truth. Daniel's eyes widened. What is that? Richard's gaze was iron. The real documents. The ones your sister-in-law thought she tricked her way into. What you inherited wasn't wealth, it was debt. Every shady deal, every false partnership you signed in secret, every fraudulent account, it's all here. I let you think you'd stolen something great, but what you really took was your own downfall. Gasps filled the room. Daniel's face turned ashen. No, you're lying. Richard slammed a hand against the papers, his voice like thunder. Look for yourself. Every signature, every date, every false claim, it all traces back to you. The company isn't yours to rule, Daniel. It's your grave to dig. Linda's struggles weakened beneath David's grip. Her eyes darted to the papers, her face crumbling as realization set in. You set us up? Richard's lips curved into a grim smile. I didn't set you up. You set yourselves up. Your greed blinded you. You wanted everything so badly, you never stopped to wonder if it was poison. Daniel's knees buckled, his voice trembling. No, this can't be. I did it all for you. To prove I was strong enough. Richard's face softened, but his words cut deep. Strength isn't measured by how much you take, Daniel. It's measured by how much you give. And you gave nothing but betrayal. Daniel's body sagged, his fight draining away. He looked smaller somehow, like the years of bitterness had finally consumed him. But then, with a sudden desperate lunge, he broke free from his father's grip. His eyes burned wild again. He scrambled toward the gun lying on the floor. Daniel, don't! I screamed. But it was too late. His hand closed around the weapon. The family scattered, screams filling the air. David pushed Linda behind him, while Thomas pulled Michael into the corner. Richard didn't move. He stood tall, his eyes locked on his son, his chest rising and falling slowly. If you're going to do it, Daniel, then end it here. With me. Daniel's hand shook violently as he raised the gun. Sweat poured down his face. His lips moved, whispering words no one could hear. For a long, breathless moment, it was just father and son, locked in a final standoff. Then, the gun slipped from Daniel's grasp. It hit the floor with a dull thud. He fell to his knees, sobbing, his hands clutching his face. I never wanted it to be like this. I just wanted to be enough. Richard knelt slowly in front of him, his own eyes glistening. He reached out, laying a trembling hand on his son's shoulder. You were always enough, Daniel. You just couldn't see it. The room went silent except for the storm outside. Linda crumpled, her head falling into her hands. Thomas and Michael held each other, tears streaking their faces. David leaned heavily against the wall, clutching his side but still standing strong. I felt the weight of decades lift from my chest. The fight was over. But the story wasn't finished. Because Richard turned then, his gaze sweeping across the family, his voice low but unyielding. You all wanted an inheritance. Well, here it is. Not money, not power. What you inherit from me is the truth. And the truth is this: greed destroys. Betrayal consumes. But love, the kind that fights, the kind that sacrifices, that's the only thing that endures. His words sank deep into the silence. Daniel wept openly, the gun forgotten. Linda sat broken, staring at the floor. And I knew in that moment that wealth had never been the true inheritance. It was the curse of greed, and the lesson to rise above it. The storm outside began to fade, the thunder rolling away into the distance. Richard stood tall, his hand still on Daniel's shoulder. He looked at me then, his eyes soft, filled with everything we had lost and everything we still had left. We survived, he said simply. And though the family was fractured, bleeding, shaken to its core, I knew he was right. We had survived. And maybe, just maybe, that survival was the real treasure left behind. Friends, that was the end of my story. I hope you've learned from it the same lesson I had to learn. Greed can blind, betrayal can wound, but nothing, nothing, is stronger than the power of truth and love. So before you go, don't forget to subscribe, like, and click the notifications button so you don't miss more of my upcoming stories. And please, tell me in the comments which part of the country you're watching from. I love knowing where my listeners are joining me from. Until next time, this is Grandma, signing off.